go. Hi there, good afternoon everybody. My name is Shannon and I'm a member of the education team here at the Wild Center. And in this episode of Lunchtime Live, I have one of my favorite coworkers with me, and his name is Al. And Al here is a juvenile black rat snake. So he is still a relatively small snake. As you can see, he fits so nicely in my hand. But black rat snakes are one of the larger species of snakes found in New York State. And I'm just going to share some information about Al here and black rat snakes with all of you. If anybody has any questions during the live video, feel free to type them in the comments and I will do my best to answer them for you. And if you missed the live video, I will try to come back and answer them in the comments later on today. But I figured because it's such a snowy, windy day here in Tupper Lake, I would stay inside and actually come into one of the warmer rooms at the Wild Center, which is the room that houses all of our snake ambassadors. So this room is climate controlled here at the Wild Center, and it's nice and humid in here as well, in order to support the lifestyle for all of our snakes, including Al here. So for those of you who are just joining, this is Al, the black rat snake. Feel free to ask questions if you have them during this live video. Otherwise, we'll talk a little bit more about black rat snakes. So as I mentioned, Al is a juvenile black rat snake. So Jeannie just asked, when is the center going to be open to the public again? So the Wild Center is actually open to the public currently. We're currently just finishing up President's Week, where we were open all week long. But we are going to go back to our winter schedule for March, which means that we will be open on Fridays, Saturdays, and Sundays from 10 to 5 every weekend in March. And then we do close for the month of April, and then we will reopen for our summer season Memorial Day weekend. And then we're open 7 days a week through the summer. But Al here, as a juvenile black rat snake, is still relatively small. He's maybe 2 feet long, but black rat snakes will grow between 6 and 8 feet at their full mature size. So they are one of the larger species, and they are native to New York State. So you typically don't find them super far north in the Adirondack Park. They tend to hang out in more southern sections of the park, but they can be found in a variety of habitats. So they like grasslands, they like fields, forests. They are actually a semi-arboreal snake, which means that they are very good climbers. So they have the ability to climb up trees, and sometimes you can find them up in some nice tall trees. So Waldine is asking, is he annoyed with you handling him, or does he like it? So it's hard to say whether he's annoyed or not. But what I'm doing as a handler is I'm constantly monitoring kind of his behavior and making sure that he feels comfortable. So right now, Al does not seem to be bothered with me handling him. Whenever you're handling a snake, you want to make sure that you're supporting its entire body, which I'm doing. Because Al is such a small snake, I'm able to do that with one hand. When he gets a lot bigger, I will most likely have to use 2 hands to handle him to support his big body. But because he's small, one hand works for this period of his life. But right now he's curious. He doesn't seem to be stressed. If he were stressed, a couple things that you may notice, he may be striking or false striking. He may be super active in trying to get away from me. But right now he seems fairly comfortable with me handling him. And we are actually trying to get Al more comfortable being handled, because he is an ambassador snake, which means that his role here at the Wild Center is to come out and talk to the public. That way we can teach our visitors about some of the many snakes you can find here in the Adirondack Park. So Al is going to be a snake that is handled for educational purposes during his life here at the Wild Center. So this is actually good training for him to be handled by me for today's video. But as I was mentioning, he is a black rat snake that can be found in a variety of habitats. These guys will climb trees to expand their prey availability. So by climbing trees, they have access to bird nests, sometimes squirrel nests, and a wider variety of prey than snakes that tend to hang out only on the ground. Now, snakes use a couple different methods to find their food. They perceive their senses very different than how we perceive ours. So if you notice right now, Al is actually sticking out his tongue. So that is one of the ways that snakes are able to sense their environment. So they actually will stick out that tongue and they'll catch air particles on that tongue. They pull it back into their mouth, and they have a specialized organ in their head. It's connected via nerves to their brain, and they touch their tongue against that organ. It's called the Jacobson's organ, and that sends signals to their brain about what they're sensing, or in theory what they're smelling. They don't smell with a nose like we do, but they use that tongue instead. And snakes actually have a special little notch built into their mouths so that they can stick out that tongue without really opening their mouths. Sometimes he opens his mouth a little bit when he's sensing, but he doesn't really have to open it very wide, which is kind of cool as well. The other way they sense is through vibrations. So snakes can't hear like we hear. They don't have an ear and a lobe like we have, but they have what's known as an inner ear, which is located next to their jawbone. And that allows them to pick up vibrations from the surrounding environment. So if a snake is slithering on the ground, they can sense vibrations being transmitted through the ground, such as little rodents scurrying, frogs hopping, and that sends them in the direction of their prey items or what they want to eat. Now, thankfully, snakes don't need to eat every single day. So here at the Wild Center, Al eats once a week. And some larger snakes, once they're mature, they only have to eat every other week. So snakes are eating a very large meal in order to sustain themselves in between feedings. So Al here likes mice, and as a black rat snake, you can imagine these guys do eat a lot of rats in the wild as well. So snakes actually are pretty important in our ecosystem because without them, we would have a lot of mice and rats and other small rodents that can actually transmit diseases to people. So they do help keep us safe by helping keep the rodent population under control. So these guys are eating meals much larger than their actual heads. So the way a snake's body is proportioned is very different than ours. So their heads are fairly small, but their bodies are very long, and they'll digest that meal through their bodies. But what they do is they can actually open their mouth about 70 degrees, and that's because they have a really flexible jawbone. There's a bone in the back of their jaw that can swing open very wide, and then they don't have a piece connecting the lower two halves of their jawbone. So they kind of walk their jaw around that prey item to work it back into their mouths, and then they digest. Now, different species of snakes will actually digest their prey in different ways. So black rat snakes like Al here, they are considered constrictors. So what that means is that they are going to constrict and in doing so kill their prey before they try to eat it. So Al is a non-venomous snake, which means that he has tiny little teeth in his mouth. They're pointed backwards because they're designed to grip and hold his prey when he strikes. But what he'll do is he'll strike his prey, grab hold of it, and then he'll use his muscular body to actually wrap his body around that prey item and constrict it. And in doing that, he cuts off the blood flow in that animal. He kills it first, and that makes it much easier to digest it and work it back into his mouth and body. Other species of snake, like the common garter snake, they are not constrictors. They actually consume live prey. So if you've ever seen a garter snake eat, that prey is live as they're trying to work it back into their mouths. And sometimes prey escapes because it's still kicking. Whereas these guys, they will make sure their prey is dead first. Now, because it's winter here in the Adirondacks, you are not going to find snakes out and about. As I mentioned, the room here where our snakes live at the Wild Center is climate controlled. So These guys are able to survive inside here year-round, but they can't survive out in the winter. And that's because as reptiles, snakes are ectothermic animals. And what that means is that their body temperature is dependent on the outdoor environment, which is why you'll often see snakes laying in the sun in the summertime, because they're warming up their bodies, and that gives them the energy to become active and go look for food. So what snakes do in the wintertime, since they aren't able to keep their bodies warm, is they go through a period of hibernation. And for reptiles like snakes, it's called brewmation. So what they do is they find a nice cozy den or hibernacula, and that den is usually under the frost line, so it may be in an old animal burrow, like a woodchuck burrow or something like that. Sometimes it's under an old building. Sometimes it could be, just anywhere nice and cozy, a cave that's underground a little bit, to keep them nice and warm. And snakes will actually den as in really big groups, and sometimes with mixed species of snakes as well, which is fairly interesting. So some documented snake dens have had, hundreds, sometimes thousands of snakes. So they come together to den, and during that period of brumation, they are going to lower their heart rate, they're going to lower their respiratory rate, so they're utilizing pretty much very, very little energy, and that allows them to survive without eating for several months. Now, occasionally, the snakes may wake up and drink, but for the most part, they are not eating all winter long. They're just resting and waiting until the weather warms up, and then come springtime with different seasonal cues like an increase in temperature and prolonged daylight, that is their cue to actually come out and start looking for food and exploring their habitat once again. So usually by April or May, depending on the weather and where the snake is living, they'll start to emerge from their dens and become active once again. But Al here, because he is an ambassador at the Wild Center, he stays awake year-round, he eats year-round, and he gets taken care of by us year-round. So if anybody is just joining, you're welcome to ask questions about Al here. Al is a juvenile black rat snake, and we are just wrapping up our program today. So I just wanted to show him off on a cold, snowy day. He lives in one of the warmer rooms at the Wild Center, so I like to come visit our snakes. One thing that you may be noticing as he's slithering towards the camera is a pattern on his back. So black rat snakes are recognizable because of their size, number one. They are some of the larger snakes in New York State. I mentioned that as adults, they can be 6 to 8 feet long. But they're also completely black, except as juveniles, they have a pattern on their backs, on those scales on their back here. So if you look closely, you can still see some of that pattern that he has. And actually, as he matures, that pattern is going to start to fade more and more, and he'll be more completely black. But that is thought to provide protection for young snakes who may not be able to defend themselves yet, because it actually mimics the coloration of a more dangerous or feared snake, the venomous copperhead snake, which can also be found in southern New York State. So here in the Adirondacks, we don't have too many venomous snakes, but these guys try to mimic that behavior and keep predators away. All right, so Anita has a question. She is asking, do scientists know whether daylight or temperature is the dominant motivation for their hibernation/brumation, or for coming out of it? That is a good question, Anita. I personally have not looked into that myself, whether it's daylight or temperature. I've always heard that it's a combination of the two, but I'm not sure if one of those factors is more dominant over the other. For snakes, because they rely so heavily on temperature, I would lean towards thinking that, temperature would play a larger role in determining when they can come out of brumation. And with climate change, we may start seeing snakes emerging sooner, because overall we're seeing trends of, a lot of earlier spring activities. So a lot of our phenology, or kind of timing of the seasons, is starting to shift with climate trends. So I would think temperature would be more of a kind of telling feature for snakes, but I am not sure whether temperature or daylight plays a larger role. I will actually have to look into that more. And if I find an answer, I'll come back and add it in the comments. But thanks for that question. All right, so Al here has been out for a little bit. He is pretty much just relaxing at this point. So we will sign off shortly, but I wanted to take this opportunity to thank you all for joining Lunchtime Live and our different live videos that the Wild Center offers. We love kind of showcasing some of our animals who don't get to come out as often with you all digitally. So thanks for tuning in and joining and supporting the Wild Center's digital work. But we hope you'll continue to join us, and have a great rest of your day, everybody. Al is ready to go take a nap in his nice warm enclosure. All right, take care.